So welcome everybody, both in the room and online, to this joint event with Migration Mobilities Bristol and the Bristol Hub for Gambling Harms Research. So delighted that we're able to have this joint event. For those of you who don't know Migration Mobilities Bristol, it's a specialist research institute that offers a creative space to engage with migration in all sorts of ways around theory, practice and policy. Excited today to have with us our speaker, Dr. Juan Zhang, and she is a senior lecturer in social anthropology in the Department for Anthropology and Archaeology here at Bristol. And she's going to talk about Casino Asia, how do casinos change social imaginations. And just a bit about Juan. Before she came to Bristol, she had research and teaching positions in Australia at the University of Queensland and the University of New England, and also at the National University of Singapore. And of particular interest to colleagues involved in gambling harms research, she's also associate editor of Political Gambling Studies journal, so that's brilliant. Just some housekeeping, particularly for the people online. If you have any questions, really welcome questions at the end of Juan's talk. Please just put them in the chat, and our hub manager, Vanessa, will get through as many of those as we can in the time that we've got. But we've got about an hour, so we're going to hear from Juan first, and then hopefully have some time for questions and discussion. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And it's such a great pleasure to have this opportunity to share some of my past and ongoing work with casino research. It's not exactly about gambling harms reduction, but I hope definitely to be able to draw some connections to that aspect, and also to bring this topic around Casino Asia to this space to sort of look beyond the context of Europe and look at sort of the emerging issues and emerging patterns that are appearing in Asia. And by Asia, I'm not only talking about the geographic space, but also sort of as a imagined space and how certain hype or certain promise has been offered when Asia has entered into our sort of the landscape of the global experience economy or the leisure economy and casino making in the broader context. So today I'm going to, of course, situate my talk based on my research in the past, mostly in Southeast Asia, but sort of a little bit in Australia because of my work in Queensland in the past, but very much so it is in combination of ethnographic fieldwork as well as some desk-based fieldwork, especially during the pandemic years when actual field visits were not possible. So a lot of these are ongoing observations, and many are perhaps a little bit speculative about what's going to happen in future. So I definitely welcome your thoughts and your suggestions on how to push this research forward. Right, so Casino Asia. By this, I mean casinos in Asia. As I said before, Asia as sort of the location where some of these newer casino resorts, especially the mega integrated casino resorts, are located, but also casinos of Asia. That is, many of the newer casinos that are operationalized and made with a particular Asian model of development. And I'll explain that a little bit throughout this talk. But it is really a sort of well, in the industry, according to many individuals who are involved and who have experienced this newer wave of casino making, the integrated resorts or IR model has become sort of the new face of casino making in the past decade or so, and will continue to be how sort of this casino or physical gambling will be modeled upon in the future. So Asia as casino is also another way for me to think about Casino Asia, in the sense that, again, Asia with however you would like to call it, with the rise of China or the rise of Asia, Asia as a geographic location as well as a space for imagination has become this place full of promise because it's imagined to be an untapped market for the gambling and the tourism sort of sector, especially when these two are combined. So Asia becomes a playground for financial adventurism. This is especially in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, when we suddenly see a huge surge and influx of global capital going into different destinations across Asia, where casino making became the main development kind of projects that are pushing forward how the region was transforming. So in the sense, Casino Asia became a speculative development models where many states, especially developmental states who still have that very strong kind of modernization agenda to think how to transform their nations in a fast kind of way and with direct foreign investment. So they see casino development through these massive development projects as the best way forward. So there's a lot of speculative development going on in the sense that global investors coming into many Asian destinations, which were not traditional gambling destinations, and start to invest in them and turn them around into these new gambling hubs in the Asian region. Therefore, my project was really trying to understand how do these newer casinos change social imaginations in and about Asia. And the sort of Asia became the next market precisely because of its vast population and, of course, its longstanding cultural or sort of historical practice of gambling, that it's a popular pastime and people have always been engaged in various kinds of gambling activities, and the kind of stigmatization around gambling is in a sort of a nuancedly different way. There is stigmatization, but because people see that as a normal-ish pastime. So going into casinos and engaging in gambling wasn't seen as a problem at a large sort of a social scale. So with that, Asia really became a new resource frontier, if we can call it like that, because of this imagined untapped market and the number of people, and with China's huge amount of capital, the gamblers from China. So this new market is seen as the new frontier for casino development. And my project, as mentioned earlier, mainly look at how casino was seen as fast-tracked urban development across many different destinations in Asia, in a sort of a broad sense. So I have done fieldwork mainly in Singapore and Macau. That's based on a 4-year project in both locations around 2012, 2013. And then I did shorter sort of fieldwork in the Philippines. This is a collaborative project with National University of Singapore as well as the University of Macau, with a few colleagues there. And our investigation was to trace the broader connections across East and Southeast Asian casino destinations, and including Australia. So we're really looking at the broader sort of Asia-Pacific connection of how the money flows, how different operators are transmitting their ideas, their business models, their regulatory protocols, and also the skills, the talents across many of these destinations, and how they basically copy and compete with each other to create sort of an interconnected network of casino gambling sort of a destination, a zone of casino destinations. So the main research areas we were looking at, they were not necessarily focusing on gambling itself. Gambling was only part and parcel of these newer forms of casino development, but we are really interested to look at multiple mobilities that are circulating through these casino spaces, including the mobilities of labor, mobilities of capital, technology, and the kind of expertise, how that's being shared, regulatory frameworks, and best practice, and basically a whole range of interconnected circulations around these spaces. Another sort of interest area was how zoning and urban development has been reimagined, especially in the lesser developed part of Southeast Asia, the mainland Southeast Asia, including the borderland, where casinos especially became a tool for poverty reduction when special economic zones were created to accommodate these casinos and to basically lift some of these territories out of underdeveloped state. And the third sort of point we're looking at is to see how a transnational fund regime, we call it a fund regime, that is to think how fun has been reconceptualized as well as ethicalized through these casino spaces and how it has been regulated. So we're saying fun is not a neutral kind of a harmless term, but it has been embedded through the biopolitical regulations around casino spaces. Certain bodies were entitled to have fun upon certain conditions. If they can demonstrate they are risk-free, that they have the financial means to consume and to enjoy themselves, then all the doors are open, the biopolitical borders disappear in front of them. But there are also risky bodies, vulnerable bodies, and various bodies that are deemed as unfit to consume in this global playground, and how they become excluded by this fund regime. Yet it's all sort of packaged under this responsible fund sort of a new framework. So that was an interesting aspect for us to look at the casino as development through these many aspects. So right. We started to see Asia as casinotopia. That is, it's the ultimate kind of consumption heaven, where anything you can imagine in terms of leisure in the experience economy can be pursued and can be easily enjoyed in these newer integrated resorts, casino spaces. That is, if you are deemed as fit, responsible, and have the financial means to go into these spaces. So again, this Asia casinotopia emerged in the post-2008 global financial crisis. At the time, places like Singapore and Macau has always been a casino destination, but the scale of casino making really sort of accelerated with this phase of casino making in Southeast Asia. So this is, again, the new model of making mega IRs, integrated resorts. Many would say this is kind of copying the Las Vegas model. It's true to a certain degree, but the scale of the new IR have far surpassed the Las Vegas model in terms of scale and its financial and cultural social impact. So we really see this new Singapore style IR as a spatial assemblage that captured capital, bodies, skills, and desires that are circulating not only at the regional, but on a global scale. So this is the materialization of a capitalist dream form, in the sense that it turns vacant spaces into a dreamland of consumption and luxury and excess and fun. It produces nothing, basically, when billions and billions poured in. It doesn't really produce anything, but offers an unsurpassed experience economy that for the global tourists who can come over and enjoy. So this is Marina Bay Sands, one of the signature casino integrated resorts in Singapore, designed by celebrity architect Moshe Safdie, who then suddenly became the kind of icon in Singapore's modern urban landscape. So when Singapore decided to open up its first casino, this proposal has been on the table for many decades. And if you are familiar with sort of Singapore's history, it's famous for being a nanny state with a very strong regulatory hand by a fairly conservative government who has been in power. So they are really resistant to legalizing casinos for fear of tarnishing the Singapore brand, because there's always the association of casinos with crime, sleaze, and unregulated money and all that. However, I think with the financial crisis, Singapore realized that it can no longer resist the injection of foreign capital, and it really needs to transform its image. And so it has finally decided to loosen up control And headline shows that how Singapore loosened its grip to play for a winning hand when casino building started to emerge in a sort of specially demarcated territory. So this is Marina Bay, which, as you can see, is actually separated from the mainland of Singapore by bodies of water. It's only connected by roads and bridges. So this is reclaimed land. It's literally creating this new destination out of nothing, out of water, and turn that into sort of the new landmark for a cosmopolitan city. And this is sort of the finished product. And Marina Bay Sands, I think this is one of the 2 casinos that were given license to open in 2010. The other one is Resorts World Sentosa. This was financed and invested by the Las Vegas Sands Group. So it's called Marina Bay Sands. The other one is a Malaysia-based Genting Group. Resorts World is their kind of brand. So it's sort of further away, but also on a slightly isolated area. So it's really interesting to think about the spatialization of these casinos, that they are somewhat connected, but always carve out from the main business as well as social political spaces of heartland or hinterland in the nation. So we can see sort of this is the main integrated resort itself, and the 3 iconic hotel towers with the infinity pool on top. And this has become sort of the new face of modern Singapore. But the operators, Las Vegas Sands, has to build a museum, exhibition spaces at the back, that's Gardens on the Bay, a public park for people to enjoy. The reason why they have to invest to build non-gaming amenities is to sustain gambling floor spaces. This is the deal that they have sort of agreed with the Singapore state. In order for them to have gaming license to operate in Singapore, they have to invest equally into non-gaming amenities. So in a sense, they are very much in a partnership with the local state to build up unused land and to transform urban landscape in a particular way, so that even though it is generating money through gambling revenue, but at the same time, it hides the gambling facade under these many other amenities or facilities that supposedly can create a cleaner image for this sector. Right, so within 1 year, Singapore, I think, has already generated, the 2 casinos has generated huge amounts of profit within 2 years. That is, it opened in 2010. In 2012, the revenue has already surpassed Las Vegas. That's 2 casinos already surpassed the entire Las Vegas Strip. And that's how profitable the casino sectors are. And that's why Singapore became the model for building the next generation of casinos in this very small island. Yeah, right. And then we could see that with Singapore's success, again, the same map shows that many casinos in Cambodia, in Malaysia, Philippines, South Korea started to emerge. And this map is not sort of shows a comprehensive image, because in Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand, not yet, but they are considering, and basically all of the Southeast Asian in this area are seriously considering turning towards casino making. And of course, when we're talking about Asia, here, my research focused mainly on East and Southeast Asia, and there's a vast region of Central as well as South Asia that are not yet covered by these sort of new casino building effort. But the future may tell a different story, and will what to see. Here, it's really connecting with Macau as the established gambling capital, and with China as sort of the main gambler exporting sort of a source country in a sense. Right, so we can see, at least in this part of the world, an extensive casino blueprint has created a new geography of knowing. This is a sort of a cultural geography's term to show that how new sort of centers or peripheries are created to shape our understanding of knowledge. So, for example, Macau and say Singapore, or the place in Vietnam, the Ho Chi Minh Strip, right? I'm going to talk about that case a little bit later. But these were unknown destinations. If you are generally talking about geographies of Southeast Asia, your imagination is always the financial centers or the social political centers. However, if you are specifically thinking about leisure and tourism and casino gambling, then these unknown places suddenly become the center for gambling and for consumption, and they connect on a different kind of global scale. And this allow us to think about global connections at a different scale. In that sense, we bypass national centers and basically connect these gambling hotspots, and that how they create a different kinds of network. Right, so it allows thinking about border crossing and jumping scales through these casino connections and casino spaces. Right, so yeah, Macau and Singapore surpass Las Vegas. Right, so this is just a little map to quickly show in this region how many casinos are actually being created just since, I think, 2010. Many of these, of course, has a longer history, and probably you won't be able to see exactly the various countries, but the Philippines has many casinos, and this is mainland Southeast Asia is fully covered, and South Korea, one in Bhutan, and of course Australia's casinos have always been connected to the Asian, broader Asian sort of space. The only exception is Indonesia at the moment, and we know the reason is the religious resistance continue to be strong, and so there is a very sort of a even stronger resistance for them to create any casino space. But other Southeast Asian nations are already sort of heavily invested into this new phase. So when we were talking about Asian casino making, the next sort of example I want to bring here is the Philippines. Again, this is an aerial map of Manila Bay and the entertainment city. Here, this was sort of closer to Manila's downtown centers, but it has always been a squatter zone. That it's a reclaimed Bay Area. It's, as you can see, it's sort of new land. There was nothing. So when the Manila sort of metropolitan state wanted to, again, regenerate the downtown sort of urban Manila, they are looking at this space and then attracting foreign direct investment to turn this into an entertainment city, which is exclusively catered to many casinos. And the investors are from Australia, Hong Kong, and Japan, and of course the US, and basically it turns into sort of zoned spaces with different casino operations. So that changes the kind of new frontier in Manila. And PACOR is the regulatory body of gambling in Manila, in the Philippines. And this statement shows a very interesting kind of promise to say that these casino-centered entertainment city will offer catalyst for economic progress and national development. So you can really see a strong state push to connect casino development with national development. There is a sort of a very different agenda, or perhaps different motivation for casino making in the Asian context as opposed to in the US or in Europe, where national development or state-driven agenda is never as strongly demonstrated as, say, in some of these development contexts. So in central Vietnam, if earlier we were talking about places like Singapore or Manila, these are still metropolis in Southeast Asia. Here, the Grand Ho Chi Minh Strip is a pristine beach that's about 100 kilometers away from Ho Chi Minh City in South Vietnam. So spaces like this, they used to be a small fishing village, and they are discovered by transnational capital, and huge resorts are being built to turn these sort of beach paradise into casino resorts. And the name itself, Ho Zhang Strip, follows after the Cotai Strip in Macau and the Las Vegas Strip, because it just imitates that casino making sort of glamour, so that they want to model after. And this is another one that happened that is currently, I think, already opened in 2020, the Hoiana Casino Resorts that occupies about 1,000 hectares. It's a US $2 billion investment project by a local group. But I think one key thing is that these sort of casino development projects occupies a huge sort of pristine land that is no longer usable by local Vietnamese citizens. They are basically excluded from using this land, and many are unable to gain access to the casino space because Vietnam, like China, gambling is illegal for citizens, so many are not allowed to enter into gambling spaces. So you can imagine these sort of huge luxury resorts are exclusively reserved for the international tourists to go in and consume. Although Hoi An, I think, has relaxed its restriction for citizens to enter. If you pay a fee, you can enter and gamble. But this is one of the few in Vietnam that citizens can go in. Right, so this is sort of the grander development plan to basically turn that whole natural beach into a stretch of resorts. Again, following the Macau's success and the Singapore model, building these grand IRs in the next 15 to 20 years. How the kind of environmental impact as well as the social political impact, there's very little study, very little understanding, because the state and the local the local elites as well as the national stage really see these as development projects to turn places around. So if they provide investment as well as jobs and basically can modernize local citizens at a very fast pace and connect to the bigger ambitious plans, say developing Ho Chi Minh City. Right, so making these new casino frontiers. Okay. Then you could really see sort of the interconnection of these many destinations that come together, and many are invested by the same operators that have big players in the region already, as well as a lot of the new players that are emerging, especially in Hong Kong, in Vietnam, and in Cambodia. So the Asian casino boom aims to lure the region's new rich, and so this has been so far the plan. And indeed, the gambling revenue generated in the region alone has been really sort of promising, and that's why it's attracting even more global investors to look at Asia as an emerging sort of new market. That's great for future business. So back to my original question, then, with all of these things that are happening, what kinds of hope and desire are embedded in this Asian casino boom? And more importantly, how do these new integrated resorts transform social imaginations within the region and beyond? So these are the main questions that I was very interested to look at. And I just offer some kind of initial sort of observations and reflections. First of all, I think on the built environment and urban life, this is one way for social imaginations to be completely transformed. This is downtown Macau. I think perhaps if you've been to Macau and you've enjoyed what it has to offer. In the foreground, you see sort of this glamorous, here, this is the Venetian at the back. The Venetian, this is one of the older casinos, and then the Parisian. At the back, you can just about to see the Londoner. That's less glamorous and occupies a sort of a lesser location on the strip. But this is sort of the kind of the venue of Macau's main attraction. If you come here, it really offers that resemblance of a Las Vegas strip and the consumption that's embedded in there and all the luxury that you can think of. And moving back about 40 years ago, this was the same main avenue you were looking at. That's the Cotai Avenue. And again, interesting sort of similarities emerge. It's reclaimed land. There was nothing in those land, and the there is a vision to develop these vacant land or wasteland and turn that into something that can generate billions and billions in profit. So the land was filled, and gradually it's been built up with all the casinos. So here it's casinos, hotels, and all the facilities basically that are affiliated to the casino industry. So this was 1971, this is 2017. Of course, that earlier image is even closer when you can see more and more resorts are starting to change the entire landscape of this space. The interesting thing of this kind of urban transformation is that they are replicable anywhere. So if you think back around the earlier images of the casinos in Singapore with that hotel towers and the casino in Vietnam, and then these ones, they all look fairly similar. It's the glistening facade, a huge building that's not connected to local heritage, local history, no local characteristic. So they are seen as this artificial architecture. You can just basically take it and then basically plant it anywhere in the world, and then they will create its own glamour and magic. So this replicability is seen as one of the success examples for making casino in a fast and assured way to attract immediate attention and success. So, and of course, the casino zone, again, is somewhat connected, but very much detached from the older town of Macau and from local people and local livelihoods. And people feel that their life have been dominated by the casino industry. And then this is tourists' side of Macau. This is not their Macau, not locals' space. So when we did research in Macau some years ago and interviewed both the visitors and also the local residents, one lawyer and writer made this remark that I thought really captured that sentiment. So he basically walked with us on the street and said, look at this. This is actually one of the older casinos that towered on the local residential areas. So tell me if this makes any sense. It's sheer ostentation. Perhaps I'm an insensitive person in terms of art and architecture, but I look at this, I see this monstrosity that's right here. It makes only harm. I respect everybody, but I think this only brings harm. Architecture-wise, it's an authentic attack. I think they're really talking about this feeling of alienation from these massive casino projects that are not really physically connected to local livelihoods, even though their livelihoods are heavily dependent on these casino spaces for jobs, basically for welfare, even. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this sense of alienation really creates a clear division between the locals and those who come to the space to consume it. And they don't really know how to address this. And then many feel a sense of being trapped in this shrinking social space that they can hold on to because more and more space are being taken over by casino and global capital. Right, so the second aspect of casinos transforming social imaginations is if from a position of being urban citizens and residents in terms of their jobs and sense of security and welfare. So these casinos in Macau and in Singapore, of course, they are big employers. I think in Macau, 1/3 of local jobs are generated in casinos and its associated sectors. And sometimes you can see a whole family working in the casino sector, maybe working as the driver, the technician, the car dealer, the hotel cleaner, and all that. So it really provides secure and comfortable employment for generations. And local people really get used with working in the casinos, and they believe this offers a really sort of a predictable sort of career path, and that offers very good salary. This is also because I think in Singapore is similar. These casinos, they are global workplaces, right? Because they're catering to global tourists and global consumers. So you need people who can speak multiple languages, people who can deal cards in a very skilled way. So they attract global workforce. But there's also very strong local protectionist kind of sentiments rising to think that if we have to have these casinos locally, then at least we should guarantee most of the jobs will go to locals. So there is a quota system, how many kind of positions you create that are given out to foreign workers, it has to be reserved equally for local workers. So in that sense, the locals will never be, at least in Macau, they don't worry about unemployment. And they can hop from one casino to the next because locals are a valuable resource for any casinos. If they want to expand the quota for foreign workers, they need to hire more locals. So to hire locals, it's almost like insurance in a sense that even if they don't do their, according to some casino operators, even if they don't do their jobs right, just to have them on site will have a guarantee for foreign workers to come on board. So local residents, they develop this very strong reliance on casinos to provide jobs. But this also has another implication that then education is no longer that important for young people. If they can see, they can easily find a job in the casino sector, why do they need to go through competitive schooling for many, many years when their family have worked in casinos and they will most likely easily look for a job in the casino sector? So then vocational training becomes more desirable than higher education or in a diverse sort of disciplinary offering. And in a way, it really limits the kind of futures that young people can aspire to. Many do have a sense of sort of a hopelessness because they want to explore something different. But this is just a comfortable setup for many of them. So they feel trapped, but then it's just too comfortable or too secure for them to leave behind and pursue something that's a lot riskier. So it creates this very strange dilemma for local residents. On the other hand, being trained in a casino offers them specialized skills. And this, if you are looking outside the casino industry, it may not be valued as much. For example, being a very skilled car dealer. But now within a globalizing casino space, this is a highly valued skill that many, many casino employers would want. So in a sense, they also have global ambitions to working, for example, Singapore, to working Australia with these specialized skills, but then they are only trapped and in circulation within the casino industry. So it also offers both mobility and very limited kind of trajectories in the same industry. Right, and okay. So on the other hand, we're talking about sort of the local employment that's very much tied to the casino industry. The government, the Macau Special Administrative Region government, again, is very much reliant on the income generated through taxation of the casino industry. What's the figure that I have in here? So 50% of Macau's GDP come from taxation from the gambling revenue, and 80% of its local GDP come from tourism, casino-led tourism that's generated by this. So you can imagine during COVID and when the border closed, Macau's GDP crashed almost down by 90% overnight. But within a few months, once the border reopened in 2023, the economy back speaks business as usual. The profit roll back in so quickly. This is probably one of the most resilient, in a sense, industries when tourists come back when the border reopened. So what happened is a really interesting sort of a way of sharing profit by the Macau state with its local people. And some people saying this is sort of bribing them with casino money to buy consent or to buy compliance from the people. So what Macau government does is a very generous cash handout. Every year, every citizen will be entitled to a kind of bonus or year-end payment. It's called wealth sharing sort of scheme that every citizen can and just get this cash payout. And also the tax is very, very low. Almost sort of a very minimum amount of tax. So what you see is a really strange welfare state system in Macau locally, with very low taxation but high welfare benefit. And a lot of that is financed by the casino money. So when the Macau government comparing them to the rest of the welfare economies, they often say that, of course, in other countries, if you have a lot of welfare, but you pay so much in tax. In our system, this is very different. But the source of income is sort of the key difference, I think, issue here. Right, so with lots of tourism, then locals also complain over crowding, high housing costs, lack of diversity, because everything's surrounded around casino-related tourism. So it creates sort of interesting dynamics on how Macau can get away from a casino dependence and move into a more diversified sort of economic future. And that's Macau. And if you are not sort of thinking about casino imaginations from a local resident perspective, if you are coming in as a tourist, a gambler, a migrant worker, or other transient subjects, then the casino changes outlook in also quite interesting ways. So, for example, there are new skills training opportunities when training schools catering to casino are happening across the region. And interestingly, many schools are opening in Taiwan. That's because of the language ability that they can cater to Mandarin-speaking consumers, and therefore training schools particularly sort of they have agreement to send then their trainees and graduates into these casino spaces for working. And of course, they are a global employer as well, with workers from all over the world, especially Filipino workers coming into these casino spaces as mainly in two kind of areas. One as entertainers, the other one as the tech sort of not really technicians, but they work for a whole range of technical jobs as engineers, as surveillance officers, as in that sort of very IT oriented sectors. So they see these casino spaces as really important stepping stones for them to pursue future cosmopolitan careers, because these are brand name employers, right? If you work in Sands, working Wing Resorts, for example, then it opened up huge opportunities for you to then pursue some other different careers in future. So they really see this as a good way to boost their personal perspective. So talent circulation in the region as well. And we also see a hierarchy emerging. For example, talents from places like Australia are always hired as managers because somehow they are seen as having this sort of stronger expertise in how to regulate casinos and manage casinos in a more modern way. So they occupy usually the managerial positions, whereas you have migrant workers that occupies sort of different service as well as hospitality roles that are replaceable. They have very short contract. Sometimes in Macau, you have employees coming in on a seasonal sort of a contract that lasts only 3 months, and every 3 months they have to renew, or if their contract are not given, then they have to go back and look for other opportunities. So there are different levels of precarity and job availability over there. And on the notion of and also sort of it creates opportunities for unique career pathways as specialized entertainers. So in Macau's casinos, this is sort of a side note, we've encountered quite a few Filipino singers who then dress up as Italian gondola riders to enhance that kind of a tourist experience. So then they come and go with this short work passes, and they hop in different casino spaces to offer this very specialized service to enhance this experience. Right, so, and as casino, so foreign workers or migrant workers then are occupying a particularly precarious position. because they actually build these casino spaces, but they are seen as high risk and vulnerable bodies. So they are not really welcomed or encouraged to consume in these spaces. And many customers, for example, in Singapore, would see them as a nuisance in the casino space. They are too loud and they are not sort of embodying those cosmopolitan images in line with the facade of Marina Bay Sands. So they are definitely urged to sign self-exclusion bans, even though whether or not they have gambling problems. And many foreign workers are, because of this stereotypical impression that as foreign workers, you are inclined to gamble away all your salaries and therefore you'll be in debt. So before they take up any job, many employers would ask them to sign a self-exclusion order so that it exclude them to enter into casino spaces. And of course, many are indeed falling in debt traps in Singapore's casinos and many other casinos because as migrant workers, they can go in casinos if they are not sort of restricted by some sort of exclusion order. Citizens cannot easily go in, but foreigners can. So many do go in, and there isn't yet a very integrated, well laid out safety net around how to protect migrant workers in these spaces. Sorry. And for those who work in the casino space, we've also talked to a few who worked in Singapore's casinos, and many indicate a strong sense of ambivalence towards the job that they do. They do recognize this offer really good career prospect. It provides a high income for their families, but they also have this moral ambiguity towards the work that they do. Vanessa, for example, is a Filipino guest service representative, really worried, and she told us, are we going to hell? Because of what we do here in the casino, it is sinful. However, we have to earn money. This is our job. These kind of moral dilemmas are particularly strong for Filipino workers who have a strong sort of a Catholic upbringing, who believe that working in the casino is very much in contradiction to their religious beliefs. However, they still see this as money necessary for their survival in a place like Singapore. And Singaporeans, on the other hand, say that if the government has already decided this is not a big deal to have casinos, why should we care? We shouldn't be concerned. This is just another job. So then they actively disassociate this sense of moral ambiguity to say that if the government has endorsed it, it's not our problems anymore. And similarly, it's sort of this strong sense of disassociation, channeling a sense of self-responsibility to either the government or to this necessity of making money so that they are no longer guilty taking part in this particular industry. Right, so if those cases are about sort of well-regulated places like Singapore or Macau, you already have a strong-ish government who are overseeing this space at the fringes of Southeast Asian casino space. You see more of a Wild West, so to speak, when less regulation has been enforced. So this is the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone in Laos. I think it has been, that's where it's located, in between Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar. I think this has made news headlines multiple times about, for example, the King's Romans Casino that's invested by a Chinese businessman, Zhao Wei, who is doing all kinds of underground activities that are really sort of going into the murky space of legality or illegality. But these casino spaces continue to be operating and not necessarily encouraged, but tolerated by, say, the Laos state, because they create entire zone of modernity that is seen from the state perspective as development. You see kind of modern buildings, local workers can go in and find decent job. And there are also lots of migrant workers going in to work. And there are Chinese businessmen coming here to do business. So it's casinos continue to be seen as fast-track development that can transform landscape in a space that's really in need of economic transformation. However, these are the kind of zones of corruption and crime, and it's all packaged, interestingly, under this notion of special economic zone, where extraterritoriality can give way to certain flexible legal as well as sort of social arrangement. So what to do with these kind of casino zones? There's very little that even the police or the local government or regulatory frameworks can really enforce, because these special economic zones were operated under what people like Zhao Wei would call a Chinese development model, that is just really focusing on economic growth rather than many other aspects. And interestingly, in an interview with Zhao Wei from one of my colleagues, Zhao Wei was saying that he was doing charity work in the economic zone, because this is helping locals to be alleviated from poverty, extreme poverty. And this is the work that's needed to change poverty of highland or mainland Southeast Asia. Right, so very quickly to sort of go to the final bit of my my talk here. I was trying to understand how casinos transform social imaginations, mainly in these 4 aspects: on the built environment, on citizens, residents, on other sort of transient subjects, and finally on the ethics of work and life. But how do these changes actually take place in these casino spaces? So what I'm trying to understand through is what I call the infrastructuralization of global gambling. And this infrastructuralization is done through 4 aspects: the urban infrastructure that's been developed through roads, airports, land, energy grid, special zones, and other kinds of hardware infrastructure. This is a freeway that connects in the Philippines, in Manila, that connects the Naiya International Airport to the Okada, Manila, that's in the entertainment zone, the casino zone that we were talking about earlier. So if you are familiar with Manila's traffic, you can imagine how it's kind of always jam-packed, that roads cannot allow cars to pass. As you can see, sort of the other side, that's regular cars. But this freeway was built in part by the casino investors to enhance or improve on the infrastructural provision, so that passengers arriving in Manila can have an easier passage all the way to the casinos during their transit or during their business trips. So it's really enhancing urban infrastructure through many of these projects via what they call a private-public partnership agreement to transform roads and public facilities. In a way, I think the local communities are saying the casinos are doing public services to basically create a slightly better infrastructural system. And then the second point on social infrastructure, this is where skilled labor, educated consumers, intermediaries, junkets, many workers and non-state stakeholders come together to form various networks that continue to sustain how the casinos operate on their skills transfer level, on how casinos are maintained, how they are designed, and how they are regulated and sort of recruited with workers going into these spaces. So this social infrastructure contains knowledge, the kind of talent, the kind of best practice, standard protocols. So many of these accommodate the built infrastructure that's already in place. And the third aspect is the legal and health infrastructure that includes newer forms of regulatory frameworks, medicalization of gambling addiction, destigmatization, and responsible gambling regime. And lastly, the digital infrastructure is something that we start to see emerging very rapidly on online and on-site gambling, digital platforms, and the kind of deterritorialization and re-territorialization of gambling, both in the casino space and at the same time on a virtual platform provided by some of these casino operators. So all these four aspects of infrastructure come together to create global gambling, because you have these physical sites, but at the same time, a global network of knowledge, of opportunities, and of destinations, of legal frameworks, of medicalized sort of support and regulatory systems, and the digital platforms for you to access. So in a way, it's very much connected beyond the Asian casinos and sort of very much going around the world. So very quickly, I'm just going to talk about the specificity of the responsible fund regime that we are talking about. This is mainly coming through the Singapore-based research. Actually, it's very straightforward. A particular form of biopolitical citizenship that has emerged, very much focusing on self-responsibility. So really, all the onus is on the individual to control, to know your limit, and the state or the operators are, as long as they provide some sort of a program, then the responsibility has been completely shifted onto the individual. At the same time, a fun ethic has been emerging. That is, if you really want to have fun, make sure you can control yourself. Make sure you can have fun responsibly, otherwise you will be banned. So this is a very different kind of biopolitical bordering in Asian casino spaces that I don't see in the European or American space yet. That is, if you have no means of control yourself, you cannot enter. I think here the regulatory aspect comes later once you're already on site. So here screening happens beforehand to evaluate whether a person has deservedness to even go into this casino space. Yeah, there are many of that. And then in Singapore, for example, also, you see a heavy sort of emphasis on separating the so-called locals and foreigners in order to protect one set of the casino consumers and to expose the other set. Very interesting news emerged in Singapore when local employers who are already on a self-exclusion ban, who can no longer go into casino, would pay their foreign workers, their migrant workers, to go into the casino and gamble on their behalf. So there is a very prevailing practice of gambling by proxy. You will see sort of foreign workers, because they just, everybody has to present their passport in order to go in. So it's really a mini border check. And according to this news report, the person being interviewed said that this is a diversifying strategy to increase the chances of winning. They don't really see the moral sort of problems embedded in asking their foreign workers to go in and gamble on their behalf. And so with that, it really begs the question to think about how these relations that are emerging on who needs to be protected and who has to be exposed further, and whether where's the limit and how effective some of these regimes are. And again, many of these regulatory regimes across casino spaces rely heavily on this notion of self-exclusion. I think this has been praised as best practice across contexts, but there's a very strong sort of a bias, or what we call sedentary bias, to think casino is always localized and sort of location bound and individual based. That is, if you restrict individuals into a particular casino, even multiple casinos, it's always tied to a location. However, when casino practice or gambling practices or gambling bodies are so fluid and they are mobile, and border crossing has become so easily achievable, it's very difficult to enforce self-exclusion in the first instance, and also you're relying on the venues to self-regulate, to enforce, and that itself is it's very hard to exercise. So I think this is what our colleagues and myself were thinking really needs a lot of anthropological understanding of gambling responsibility in these more and more connected international spaces of gambling, and to understand gambler mobilities and how that can actually turn some of these self-exclusion measures ineffective. Right, I think I'm running out of time, so let me just jump straight to the final ones. So I think why are we looking at casinos now? What I've been talking about is the first wave, right, in the post-2008 financial crisis. Interestingly, I thought with that wave of casino making is kind of done, but in the post-pandemic sort of era, we see a new wave of casino making. Billions and billions are going into Singapore with promises of opening, expanding the current casino space and going into some other destinations. In Russia, so earlier pictures show in Japan, finally, they are talking about a mega casino resort in Osaka. In Russia, this is sort of the border zone in Vladivostok. Even during the Russian-Ukrainian war, visitors to this casino have not been reduced. The profit generated in casino is unimpacted by the war at all. And last year, a new casino, Europe's largest integrated resorts, opened in Cyprus. So if you're thinking about summer holidays, maybe give this one a go, because this is what I call the Asian brand of casino. It's created or operated by Malco Resorts. It's a Hong Kong-based developer. So this is really Asian money going into Europe and transforming European spaces. So what that means remains to be seen. So finally, let me just kind of quickly wrap up to my last points. Again, what we are looking at the casinos in Asia is really a speculative development, and that sort of invite us to rethink about technologies of imagination around casino, around gambling, and why this is making such a huge sort of resurgence in a post-crisis moment when there's a lot of capital and then they need a place to inject, and then casinos become the center of their investment interest. So to understand that, I think especially when we're thinking about gambling harms reduction, etc., it's really important to focus on the operationality of how these programs work. But a larger anthropology of casino operations or gambling practices may be helpful to look at global connections, how global networks are transforming the dynamics beyond one location or one group of people, and see how that knowledge, how that platforms are interconnected, and how that transforms the entire industry. Is no longer the older formats that we're thinking about. And of course, novel technologies, despite ongoing geopolitical tensions. So all of these will invite us to engage and rethink about casino development beyond Asia in a position of ethics, sustainability, and possibly egalitarianism in future. So thank you very much. Sorry for going.